The homestead was dying. Delilah could see it in the way the barn door hung crooked on its hinges, the gap wide enough now that the wind cut straight through and spooked what was left of the livestock. She could hear it in the groan of the roof beams at night, settling under the weight of snow that came earlier each year and stayed longer. She could feel it in her hands, cracked, raw, bleeding at the knuckles from work that never ended and never got easier. She stood in the yard with an axe, breathing hard, staring at the woodpile that should have been twice as high by now. October was already chewing at November's heels, and the cottonwoods along the creek had gone bare a week ago. The sky had that empty, metallic look it got before the first real snow. A few more weeks, maybe less. The axe felt heavier than it should. She swung anyway. The blade bit into the log, stuck halfway. She wrenched it free, swung again, stuck again. Her arm shook. She wanted to scream, but there was nobody around to hear it, and what good would that do? "Damn you, Thomas," she muttered. Her late husband had been good at exactly two things: making promises and breaking them. He'd promised her a life out here, a future carved out of nothing, land that would be theirs free and clear if they could just hold on long enough. He'd promised her safety, security, a place to belong. What he'd actually left her was a sagging cabin, a mortgage she didn't know existed until after he was in the ground, and a name people in town whispered about like it was something dirty. She didn't miss him. She missed the idea of not being alone. The axe came down hard, and this time the log split clean. Both halves tumbled into the dirt. Small victory. She bent to pick them up, and that's when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Delilah straightened fast, axe still in hand. Out here, visitors didn't just happen. You were either expected, lost, or trouble. She hadn't invited anyone, and the kind of men who got lost on this stretch of the frontier didn't usually find their way to a widow's property by accident. The rider came around the bend slow. A big man on a bigger horse, dark coat and hat. No hurry in him. He moved like someone who knew the land wouldn't kill him today and didn't care much if it tried tomorrow. Delilah's fingers tightened on the axe handle. He stopped about 20 feet out, eyes on her. Didn't dismount. Didn't speak right away. Just took her in. The axe, the woodpile, the cabin behind her with its stones half mortared and its chimney leaking smoke in three directions. "Mrs. Marsh," he said finally. Not a question. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Ephraim Cutter." His voice was low, gravelly, the kind that didn't waste itself on extra words. "I'm here about your situation." "My situation," she repeated. "That's a polite way of putting it." "I'm not here to be rude." "Then maybe you should state your business and move on. I've got work to do." He glanced at the woodpile, then back at her. Something in his expression shifted, just barely. Pity, maybe. Or calculation. She hated both. "I'll be plain," he said. "I know you're in trouble. I know Thomas left you with debts. I know the bank's been circling. And I know winter's coming whether you're ready for it or not." Her jaw tightened. "If you're here to buy the land, you're wasting your time." "I'm not here to buy anything." "Then what?" Ephraim swung down from the saddle in one smooth motion, boots hitting the ground with a solid thud. He was taller than she'd thought, 6'3", maybe more, and built like someone who'd spent his whole life doing the kind of work that either killed you or made you hard as iron. His face was weathered, scarred along the jaw, older than hers, but not by much. 40, maybe. 45. He took 2 steps forward, stopped when she raised the axe a fraction. "I'm here to offer you a deal," he said. "I don't make deals with strangers." "You did once. You married one." The words landed like a slap. She felt her face go hot, then cold. "You don't know a damn thing about my marriage." "I know enough." He tilted his head, watching her. "I know Thomas Marsh was a gambler and a liar. I know he borrowed money from people who don't forgive debts. I know he left you holding the bag, and I know you've been breaking your back trying to pay it off alone." "How do you—" "I make it my business to know things." He paused. "Especially when I'm considering a partnership." "A partnership?" "Marriage," he said, flat and direct. "You and me. Legal and binding." For a moment she just stared at him. Then she laughed, short, bitter, disbelieving. "You rode all the way out here to propose to a woman you've never met." "I've met you now." "That's insane." "Maybe." He didn't look bothered by the accusation. But it's also practical. You need help. I need a wife. We both need something the other one has. I don't need anything from you. You need to survive the winter. You need someone to fix that barn before it falls on your head. You need a man's name on the deed so the bank stops treating you like your easy pickings. He gestured at the cabin. You need a lot of things, Mrs. Marsh. Pride's not going to keep you warm when the snow's 3 feet deep. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to tell him to get back on his horse and ride straight to hell. But her hands were bleeding, her back ached, and the woodpile was still too small. What do you get out of it? She asked quietly. A home. A wife. A future. He met her eyes. Children, if we're lucky. There it was. The truth under the transaction. He wasn't offering charity. He wasn't even offering kindness. He was offering a trade, her survival for his legacy. I don't love you, she said. I don't love you either. Then why? Because love's got nothing to do with it. His voice didn't rise, didn't soften. Love doesn't fix a roof. Love doesn't pay a debt. Love doesn't keep you alive when the temperature drops and the food runs out. What I'm offering is something better than love. I'm offering a partnership. You do your part, I do mine. We build something that lasts. And if it doesn't work, then we'll both know we tried. The wind picked up, rattling the loose boards on the barn. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped. Delilah looked at Ephraim Cutter, this stranger, this blunt, impossible man, and tried to find the lie in him. But there was nothing. No charm, no sweetness, no false promises. Just a straightforward offer from someone who seemed to understand exactly how bad things were. I need time to think, she said. You've got until tomorrow morning. After that, I'm riding north, and the offer goes with me. That's not enough time. It's all the time there is. He turned back toward his horse, then paused. One more thing. If you say yes, I'm not interested in a wife who's going to fight me every step of the way. I'll pull my weight, but I expect you to pull yours. No resentment. No second guessing. We're in it together, or we're not in it at all. He mounted up, tipped his hat, and rode off the way he came. Delilah stood there until the sound of hoofbeats faded, until the wind was the only thing left. Then she looked down at her hands, bloody, shaking, useless, and wondered if she'd just been offered a lifeline or a noose. That night, she did not sleep. She sat at the table with a candle burning down to nothing, staring at the stack of papers Thomas had left behind. Loan notices, promissory notes, letters from men with titles like land agent and debt collector, all of them politely worded and absolutely final. She tried to make sense of them before, tried to find a way out, but the numbers didn't lie. She owed more than the land was worth, more than she could pay in 5 years, maybe 10, and winter was coming. She thought about Ephraim's face, hard, unreadable, no warmth in it, but no cruelty either. She thought about his hands, scarred and capable, the kind that knew how to build things. She thought about his offer, stripped of all the romance and lies that had ruined her the first time. Marriage. Not love. Not safety. Just survival. Was that enough? She didn't know. But she knew what happened to women out here who tried to make it alone. She'd seen them in town, gaunt, desperate, clinging to the edges of charity until there was nothing left to cling to. She'd seen the way men looked at them, like they were opportunities. She'd seen the way they disappeared. She wasn't going to disappear. The candle guttered out. Delilah sat in the dark, listening to the wind, and made her decision. Ephraim came back at dawn. She was waiting for him in the yard, dressed in the only good dress she still owned, faded blue cotton, mended at the sleeves. Her hair was pinned up, her hands were clean. She looked like someone trying to pretend this was a normal day. He dismounted, studied her for a long moment. "You've made up your mind," he said. "I have." "And?" She met his eyes. "I'll marry you." He nodded once, like he'd expected it. "We'll go into town this morning, get it done at the courthouse." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He stepped closer, and for the first time she saw something almost soft in his expression. Not quite kindness, but close. "I'm not going to hurt you, Delilah. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to leave you worse off than I found you. That's my word." "And if you break it?" "Then you can shoot me." She almost smiled. Almost. "I don't have a gun. I'll get you one." He offered his hand. Deal? She looked at his hand, rough, broad, steady, and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about all the ways staying alone would definitely go wrong. She took his hand. Deal. The courthouse in town was a squat brick building that smelled like old paper and tobacco. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles and a permanent frown, looked up when they walked in together. "Help you?" he asked. "Marriage license," Ephraim said. The clerk's eyes flicked to Delilah, then back. "You're Mrs. Marsh." "I am." "Your husband passed, 4 months ago?" "5. The clerk made a disapproving sound in his throat, but didn't say anything. He pulled out the forms, dipped his pen, and started writing. "Names? Ephraim Cutter. Delilah Marsh. Occupation? Rancher," Ephraim said. "Homesteader," Delilah said. The clerk kept writing. "Witnesses?" "We'll find someone," Ephraim said. They did. 2 men loitering outside the general store, bored enough to come inside and sign their names for $1 each. The ceremony, if it could be called that, took less than 5 minutes. The clerk read the legal language in a monotone, asked if they agreed, recorded their answers, and stamped the paper. "You're married," he said. "Congratulations." It didn't feel real. They walked out into the cold morning air, legally bound, practically strangers. Delilah looked down at her hand, still bare, no ring, and wondered what the hell she'd just done. "You hungry?" Ephraim asked. She blinked. "What?" "Breakfast. There's a place down the street." Yes, I guess." They ate in silence at a corner table in the town's only restaurant, a cramped room that served eggs and bacon and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Delilah picked at her food, too nervous to taste it. Ephraim ate steadily, methodically, like a man fueling up for work. "I've got supplies in the wagon," he said eventually. "Enough to get us through the winter if we're careful. Flour, salt, dried meat. Some tools, nails, rope." "You came prepared." "I don't do things halfway." "What if I'd said no?" He shrugged. "Then I'd have sold the supplies and moved on." "That's simple. That's simple." He set down his fork, looked at her directly. "I'm not a complicated man, Delilah. I see a problem, I fix it. I make a plan, I follow through. I give my word, I keep it. That's all you need to know about me." "What do you need to know about me?" He thought about that. "Can you shoot?" "No." "Can you ride?" "Not well." "Can you cook?" "Barely." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, we'll work on it." For the first time since this whole insane thing started, Delilah felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief exactly, not hope, but maybe something close to it. "What now?" she asked. "Now we go home," Ephraim said, "and we get to work." The ride back to the homestead took most of the day. Ephraim drove the wagon, loaded with more supplies than Delilah had seen in months, while she sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket he'd given her without comment. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. But the silence wasn't hostile. It was just there. When they pulled into the yard, the sun was already sinking behind the hills, painting everything in shades of orange and gray. Ephraim climbed down, started unloading crates and sacks. Delilah moved to help, but he waved her off. "I've got it. You get a fire going." She hesitated, then nodded and went inside. The cabin felt different now, smaller, less hers. She built up the fire, set water to boil, and tried not to think about the fact that a stranger, her husband, was about to walk through that door and stay. When he came in, arms full of supplies, he paused in the doorway. "Where do you want these?" The corner, by the stove." He set them down carefully, then straightened and looked around. Taking inventory, she realized. Seeing what needed fixing. There was a lot. "Roof's got leaks," he said. "I know." "Chimney's cracked." "I know." "Foundation sinking on the north side." "I know." Her voice came out sharper than she meant. "I know it's falling apart. I've been trying to fix it, but I can't do everything at once." He looked at her, and there was no judgment in his face, just acknowledgement. "You've done more than most people could have, but you're not alone anymore. I'll handle it." Something in her throat tightened, She turned away, busied herself with the kettle. There's coffee, if you want some. I do. They drank coffee in silence while the fire crackled and the wind howled outside. Eventually, Ephraim stood, stretched, and glanced toward the ladder that led to the loft where Delilah had been sleeping. I'll take the floor tonight, he said. She frowned. What? The floor. You take the bed. We're married. We are. But we're not. He trailed off, seemed to choose his words carefully. We're not there yet. And I'm not the kind of man who rushes things that matter. You'll sleep where you're comfortable. I'll sleep where I can. When you're ready for something different, you'll tell me. Delilah stared at him. In 5 months of being a widow, in all the time she'd spent bracing herself for the worst, she hadn't expected this. Consideration, patience, respect. You don't have to. I know I don't. I'm choosing to. He grabbed a blanket from his pack, spread it on the floor near the fire. Good night, Delilah. Good night. She climbed the ladder to the loft, lay down in the narrow bed, and listened to him settle below. The floorboards creaked, the fire popped, the wind rattled the shutters. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Delilah Marsh fell asleep without fear. The next morning, Ephraim was already outside when she woke. She found him on the roof, prying up damaged shingles with a crowbar, a fresh stack of cedar splits piled on the ground below. You work fast, she called up. No point wasting time. He didn't look down, just kept working. There's eggs and bread inside. Help yourself. She did. Then she came back out and stood in the yard watching him. He moved with the kind of efficiency that came from years of hard labor. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Every swing of the hammer landed exactly where it needed to. What can I do? She asked. He paused, glanced down at her. You know how to mix mortar? No? I'll teach you. And he did. For the next 3 hours, Ephraim showed her how to blend lime and sand and water into a thick paste, how to trowel it into the gaps between the stones, how to smooth it before it set. Her hands ached, her back hurt, but the work felt good, productive, like she was building something instead of watching it fall apart. They worked through the morning, through lunch, into the afternoon. Ephraim fixed the roof while Delilah patched the foundation. He repaired the barn door while she restacked the woodpile. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was always something useful, teaching her, guiding her, never condescending. By the time the sun started to set, the homestead looked different. Not perfect, not new, but stronger, more solid. Delilah stood in the yard, breathing hard, looking at what they'd accomplished in a single day. We did good, Ephraim said, coming to stand beside her. Yeah, she said quietly. We did. That night, they ate together. She made a stew from the dried meat and vegetables he'd brought, and it was the first real meal she'd had in weeks. They didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable now, familiar. When it was time for bed, Ephraim grabbed his blanket again. You don't have to sleep on the floor, Delilah said. He looked at her, cautious. You sure? I'm sure. She climbed the ladder, then glanced back. Just sleep. That's all. Just sleep, he agreed. He followed her up, lay down on the far side of the narrow bed, kept a careful distance between them. The mattress dipped under his weight. The air felt too warm, too close. Delilah lay stiff and still, waiting for him to do something, say something, reach for her. He didn't. He just closed his eyes, and within minutes started breathing slow and deep. She stayed awake longer, staring at the ceiling, listening to him sleep. And slowly, the tension in her body unwound. He'd meant what he said. He wasn't going to push, he wasn't going to take. He was just going to be there. And somehow, that was enough. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Ephraim worked from dawn until dusk, fixing, building, reinforcing. Delilah worked beside him, learning as she went. He taught her how to handle an axe properly, how to shoe a horse, how to read the sky for weather. She taught him where the good water was, which patches of land flooded in spring, which trails the deer used. They were partners, not lovers, not friends, exactly, but partners. And it worked. The homestead started to look like a place people actually lived instead of a place someone was barely surviving. The roof stopped leaking. The barn stood straight. The woodpile grew tall and solid. Ephraim brought in game, deer, rabbits, wild turkey, and Delilah learned how to dress and cook it properly. At night they lay side by side in the narrow bed, close but not touching, and talked in low voices about nothing important. Plans for spring, repairs still needed, small things, safe things. Weeks passed. October bled into November. The first snow came light and brief, just a warning. Delilah stood at the window, watching it fall, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Security. Not happiness. Not yet. But the quiet, steady knowledge that she wasn't going to freeze or starve or lose everything. "We're going to make it," she said, more to herself than to Ephraim. He looked up from the table where he was sharpening a knife. "Yeah," he said, "we are." And then 3 days later, everything fell apart. What? The man who rode up to the cabin was thin and sharp-faced, dressed in a city suit that looked ridiculous against the backdrop of snow and mud. He had papers in his hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Delilah saw him from the window and felt her stomach drop. "Ephraim," she called. He came out of the barn, took one look at the rider, and his expression went stone cold. The man dismounted, still smiling. "Mrs. Marsh, or should I say Mrs. Cutter, now. Congratulations on the marriage." "What do you want?" Delilah asked. "Just a friendly visit. My name's Leonard Ashford. I represent the Dakota Loan and Trust Company." He held up the papers. "I'm here about your outstanding debt." "I've been making payments," Delilah said. "You have. Unfortunately, they're not nearly enough." Ashford unfolded the papers, showed her a number that made her vision blur. "Your late husband borrowed a substantial sum. The interest has been accruing. You're now 3 months behind on the agreed schedule." "That's not possible. You've been paying the minimum, which doesn't even cover the interest." His smile widened. "I'm afraid the bank has decided to call in the full amount. You have 30 days to settle the debt, or we'll be forced to foreclose." The world tilted. Delilah felt Ephraim's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "How much?" Ephraim asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Ashford glanced at him, sized him up. $1,800. $1,800? It might as well have been $1 million. "That's highway robbery," Ephraim said. "That's business." Ashford tucked the papers away. 30 days, Mrs. Cutter. I'll be back to collect." He rode off, leaving them standing in the yard, the smell of smoke and snow and ruin in the air. Delilah's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, hands shaking. "Can't do this," she whispered. "We've been working so hard. Ephraim crouched beside her, his face grim. "He can. And he will." "Then what do we do?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he stood, looked out at the land they'd been fighting to save, and said the only thing he could. "We fight back." The fire had burned down to embers by the time Ephraim finally spoke again. He'd been sitting at the table for over an hour, staring at the loan documents Ashford had left behind, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. Delilah stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the dark. Her mind kept circling back to the same impossible number. $1,800. They didn't have $18 between them, let alone $1,800. "There has to be a mistake," she said for the third time. "Thomas was reckless, but he wasn't stupid enough to borrow that much." "Men do stupid things when they're desperate." Ephraim's voice was flat, distant. "Or when they think they've got a sure thing." "What's that supposed to mean?" He looked up at her, and something in his expression made her stomach clench. "Your husband gambled, didn't he?" "Sometimes. Not seriously." "Delilah," he said her name like a warning. "I need you to be straight with me. How bad was it?" She wanted to lie, wanted to protect Thomas's memory, even though he didn't deserve it. But Ephraim was her husband now, and the debt was his problem too. "Bad," she admitted quietly. "He'd go into town, sometimes for days, come back with empty pockets and excuses. I stopped asking after a while." Ephraim nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he'd already suspected. Men like that don't just borrow from banks. They borrow from whoever's offering. And the kind of people who lend to gamblers charge interest that'd make a banker blush. "You think the debt's real?" "I think parts of it are. But 1,800? He shook his head. "That number's been inflated. They're squeezing you because they think you're an easy target. A widow with no family, no protection, no way to fight back. But I'm not a widow anymore. No. His eyes met hers. You're not. Something passed between them then, not quite trust, but the beginning of it. An understanding that they were in this together, whether they liked it or not. So what do we do? She asked. Ephraim stood, walked to the fire, and threw another log on. Sparks flew up, briefly illuminating his face. We need to see the original loan documents. Find out who Thomas actually borrowed from and how much. If Ashford's lying, we need proof. And if he's not, then we find a way to pay it. Delilah almost laughed. With what? We've got maybe $40 in savings and a homestead that's barely holding together. I've got some money put away, Ephraim said carefully. Not enough to cover the whole debt, but enough to make a dent. She stared at him. You'd use your own money? For a debt that's not even yours? It's ours now, that's what marriage means. That's not what this marriage was supposed to be. You said it yourself. It's a partnership, a practical arrangement. You didn't sign up to bail me out of my dead husband's mistakes. Ephraim turned to face her fully, and there was something hard in his expression now. Not anger, but determination. I signed up to build something with you. Can't build on land we don't own, so yeah, I'll use my money. And when this is over, we'll figure out how to make it back together. Delilah felt something crack open in her chest. Gratitude mixed with shame, mixed with something else she couldn't quite name. I don't know how to pay you back. I'm not asking you to. He moved closer, stopped just short of touching her. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She looked up at him, this man she'd married out of desperation, and realized she didn't have much choice. Yes. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. They talked through the night, making plans. Ephraim would ride into town at first light, track down the original loan documents at the courthouse. Delilah would go through Thomas's things again, see if there was anything she'd missed, letters, receipts, anything that might prove the debt was fraudulent. By the time dawn broke, they had the skeleton of a plan. Not a good plan, not one that guaranteed success, but it was something. Ephraim saddled his horse while Delilah packed him food for the journey. Her hands shook as she wrapped bread and dried meat in cloth. Be careful, she said when he came back inside. He paused, looked at her like he was trying to decide whether to say something. Then he just nodded. I'll be back before dark. She watched him ride away, feeling more alone than she had in weeks. Then she turned back to the cabin and got to work. Thomas's things were stored in a trunk at the foot of the bed. Clothes she should have burned months ago, a few books, some personal effects that meant nothing to her now. She'd gone through it before, but not thoroughly. Not with the kind of desperation that made you look twice at everything. She dumped the contents onto the floor and started sorting. Most of it was junk. Old newspapers, broken tools, a deck of cards with the edges worn soft from use. She was about to give up when her hand closed around something hard at the bottom of the trunk, a leather journal. She pulled it out, flipped it open. Thomas's handwriting, cramped and messy, filled the pages. Dates, names, numbers. It took her a moment to realize what she was looking at. A ledger. A record of every bet he'd made, every loan he'd taken, every debt he'd accumulated. Her hands went numb. The entries went back years, long before they'd moved to Dakota, back when they were still in Missouri. Small amounts at first, $5 here, $10 there. Then bigger, 20, 50, 100. The names beside the numbers meant nothing to her, but the pattern was clear. Thomas had been borrowing from anyone who'd lend, using old debts to pay new ones, digging himself deeper with every transaction. And at the bottom of the last page, written in different ink, newer than the rest, Dakota Loan and Trust. $1,000. Interest at 15% per annum. Not $1,800. $1,000. Delilah's breath came faster. She flipped back through the pages, doing the math in her head. Even with interest, even with missed payments, the debt shouldn't be more than $1,200 or $1,300. Ashford had added $500 out of thin air. She grabbed the journal and ran outside, even though Ephraim was long gone. She needed to tell someone, needed to confirm what she was seeing. But there was no one. Just her and the wind and the knowledge that they'd been lied to. She went back inside, forced herself to slow down, to think. The journal was proof, but it wasn't enough. Ashford could claim Thomas had taken out additional loans, borrowed more money she didn't know about. She needed the bank's records, needed to see their version of the debt, and that meant waiting for Ephraim. The day dragged. She tried to work, tried to keep herself busy, but her mind kept circling back to the numbers. $500. That was the difference between impossible and maybe, just maybe, survivable. When Ephraim finally rode back into the yard, the sun was already setting. He looked exhausted, his face drawn, but there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "You found something," she said. "Yeah." He dismounted, pulled a folded paper from his coat. Official record from the county clerk. Thomas borrowed $1,000 from Dakota Loan and Trust in March of last year. The original terms were clear: 15% interest, monthly payments of $50 until the principal was satisfied. "I found his journal," Delilah said quickly. "It matches. 1,000, not 1,800. Ephraim's expression darkened. "Then Ashford's been doctoring the numbers. Can we prove it?" "This is proof." He held up the paper. "The county record is official. If Ashford's claiming a higher amount, he's committing fraud." Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her dizzy. "So we can fight this. We can take it to the sheriff, show him—" "It's not that simple." Ephraim's voice was careful now, controlled. "The sheriff's not going to go after a loan company on the word of a widow and a drifter. We need more than just conflicting numbers. We need to prove Ashford's been doing this to other people. Make it a pattern, not just one dispute." "How do we do that?" "We ask around, find out who else has been squeezed by Dakota Loan and Trust. Get them to come forward." Delilah thought about the other homesteaders scattered across the territory, the ones who kept to themselves, who didn't trust outsiders, who'd rather lose everything than admit they'd been taken advantage of. "That could take weeks." "We don't have weeks." "I know." Ephraim rubbed his face, suddenly looking every one of his years. "But it's the only play we've got. Unless you want to just hand over the property and walk away." "No." The word came out fierce, automatic. "This is my land. I've bled for it. I'm not giving it up without a fight." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "All right then. We fight." They spent the next week riding out to neighboring homesteads, talking to anyone who'd listen. Most people slammed doors in their faces. A few were polite but unhelpful. But slowly, painfully, a picture started to emerge. Dakota Loan and Trust had been operating in the territory for 3 years. They targeted struggling farmers and ranchers, offered loans at rates that seemed reasonable, then buried the borrowers in compound interest and hidden fees. When people couldn't pay, the company foreclosed and resold the land at a profit. And Leonard Ashford was the man who handled collections. They found a rancher named Garrett who'd lost 200 acres the year before, a farmer's widow named Sarah who'd been forced to sell out after her husband died, a young couple who'd barely escaped foreclosure by selling everything they owned and moving back east. Every single one of them had a story that sounded like Delilah's. Every single one of them had been told they owed far more than the original loan. "It's a system," Ephraim said one night as they rode back to the cabin. "They're not just lending money, they're stealing land." "So what do we do with this information?" Delilah asked. "The sheriff still won't care. These people are nobodies. We're nobodies." "Maybe, but if we can get enough of them together, make enough noise, someone's going to have to pay attention." "Who?" "The territorial governor, the federal land office. Hell, even the bank that's backing Dakota Loan and Trust. They might not know what Ashford's doing in their name." It was a long shot. Delilah knew that. But it was better than nothing. They organized a meeting at the church in town, spread the word as best they could. Delilah didn't expect many people to show up. She figured maybe Garrett and Sarah, maybe 1 or 2 others. 23 people came. They crowded into the small building, farmers and ranchers and their wives, all of them worn down by the same fight. Delilah stood at the front with Ephraim beside her, looking out at their weathered faces, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know it's not easy to talk about this, to admit you've been cheated. But that's why we're here. Because we're not the only ones. And if we stand together, maybe we can do something about it." A man in the back spoke up. "What exactly are you proposing?" Ephraim stepped forward. "We go to the territorial governor. Present him with evidence of fraud. Show him that Dakota Loan and Trust has been systematically targeting homesteaders, inflating debts, and stealing land. If we can prove it's a pattern, not just individual disputes, we've got a case. And if the governor doesn't care, someone else asked, then we go to the newspapers. Make it public. Make it loud. Force someone to investigate. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some skeptical. Some angry. Some desperate enough to try anything. Sarah, the widow who'd lost her farm, stood up. I'm in. I've got nothing left to lose. Garrett nodded. Me too. One by one, others agreed. Not everyone. Some walked out, unwilling to risk drawing attention to themselves. But enough stayed, enough to matter. By the time the meeting ended, they had a plan. They'd compile every scrap of evidence they had, loan documents, payment records, letters from Ashford, and take it to the Capitol. Ephraim would go. He had the most experience dealing with officials, the most credibility as a man in a world that didn't listen to women or farmers. Delilah hated that he had to be the one to go. Hated that her voice wouldn't carry the same weight. But she swallowed her pride and agreed. How long will you be gone? She asked that night as they lay in bed. A week, maybe 2, depending on how hard it is to get an audience with the governor. That's cutting it close. Ashford said we had 30 days. We're already 2 weeks in. I know. Ephraim turned his head to look at her. If I'm not back in time, if he shows up to collect, you stall him. Tell him I'm handling it. Tell him whatever you have to. And if he doesn't listen, then you shoot him. She almost smiled. You still haven't gotten me that gun. It's in the barn. Rifle. Loaded. I showed you how to use it last week. I'm a terrible shot. You don't have to be good. You just have to be willing. His voice was serious now. I mean it, Delilah. If Ashford or anyone else tries to take this land while I'm gone, you make them regret it. Something warm and fierce bloomed in her chest. Not love. Not yet. But something close. Partnership. Trust. The knowledge that this man, this stranger she'd married, was willing to fight for her. I will, she said. He left at dawn with a satchel full of documents and a grim determination that made him look older than his years. Delilah watched him right away, then went back into the cabin and pulled the rifle down from where he'd hidden it. It was heavier than she remembered. She checked the chamber, made sure it was loaded, then set it by the door, just in case. The days passed slowly after that. Delilah kept herself busy with chores, with repairs, with anything that would keep her mind from spinning out into worst-case scenarios. She mucked out the barn, chopped wood until her shoulders screamed, patched holes in the roof that didn't really need patching. At night, she lay alone in the bed that still smelled faintly of Ephraim, leather and wood smoke and sweat, and tried not to think about what would happen if he didn't come back. On the 5th day, Leonard Ashford rode up to the cabin. Delilah saw him coming from a distance, that same thin figure on a dark horse, and her stomach dropped. She grabbed the rifle, checked it one more time, and stepped outside. Ashford reined in at the edge of the yard, his smile as sharp as ever. Mrs. Cutter, lovely to see you again. Mr. Ashford. She kept her voice level. You're early. I was in the area. Thought I'd check on your progress. His eyes flicked to the rifle in her hands. Expecting trouble? Just being cautious. Wise. He dismounted, brushed dust from his coat. So, do you have the money? My husband's handling it. Is he now? And where is your husband? Away on business. Ashford's smile widened. How convenient. You know, Mrs. Cutter, I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've learned to recognize when someone's stalling. You don't have the money, do you? We're working on it. Working on it. He laughed, short and humorless. Let me explain something to you. The bank doesn't care about your efforts. They don't care about your hard work or your good intentions. They care about results, and if you can't deliver results, they'll take the land. It's that simple. The debt's inflated, Delilah said. I know it is. I found my husband's records. He borrowed $1,000, not $1,800. Ashford's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. I'm afraid you're mistaken. I have proof. Do you? That's interesting. He took a step closer, and Delilah raised the rifle slightly. He stopped, hands up in mock surrender. Easy now. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just here to remind you of your obligations. I know what I owe. Do you? He pulled a paper from his pocket, unfolded it slowly. According to our records, your late husband took out a second loan 6 months before he died. Another $800. That brings the total to $1,800 plus accumulated interest. Delilah's mind raced. Thomas's journal had ended in March. If he'd taken another loan after that, she'd have no way of knowing, but Ashford could just as easily be lying. Show me the documentation. I don't have to show you anything. The bank has it on file. If you want to dispute the debt, you're welcome to hire a lawyer and challenge it in court. His smile was poison. Of course, that would cost money you don't have, and by the time it was settled, you'd have already lost the land. He was right, and they both knew it. The system was rigged. Even if she could prove fraud, it would take months, maybe years, to see justice. And she'd be homeless long before then. Get off my property, she said quietly. Gladly. But I'll be back in 2 weeks, and when I come, I'll expect payment in full. If you don't have it, I'll be bringing the sheriff and a foreclosure notice. He mounted his horse, looked down at her one last time. Enjoy your home while you still have it, Mrs. Cutter. He rode off, leaving Delilah standing in the yard with a rifle in her hands and a cold knot of fear in her gut. She went inside, set the rifle down, and sat at the table with her head in her hands. 2 weeks. That was all she had left. And Ephraim wasn't even back yet. She thought about running, taking what she could carry and disappearing before Ashford returned. But where would she go? She had no family, no money, nowhere to run to, and besides, she'd meant what she'd said. This was her land. She wasn't giving it up. So she waited. 7 days later, Ephraim came back. She heard the hoofbeats and ran outside, her heart in her throat. He looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in days. But when he saw her, something in his face softened. "You're still here," he said. "Where else would I be?" She helped him down from the horse, steadied him when he swayed. "What happened?" "I saw the governor. Gave him everything we had." He rubbed his face. He listened, said he'd look into it. "But Delilah, these things take time, investigations, hearings, legal processes. We're talking months, not weeks." Her heart sank. "We don't have months." "I know." He met her eyes. "I talked to some people, called in a few favors, got us an extension on the debt. Another 60 days. "How?" "I put up my savings as collateral, convinced the bank that we'd have the full amount by then." "Ephraim, it's done." His voice was firm. "We've got time now. Not much, but enough to keep fighting." Delilah wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was insane for risking his own money on a fight that wasn't his, but the relief was too overwhelming. They had time. They had a chance. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded, swayed again. "I need to sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." She helped him inside, got him to the bed. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow. Delilah sat beside him, watching him breathe, and felt something shift inside her. This man had risked everything for her, not because he loved her, not because he owed her, but because he'd given his word, and his word meant something. She reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed the hair back from his forehead. He didn't wake, but something in her chest cracked open a little wider. Ephraim slept for 16 hours straight. Delilah checked on him twice, worried he might be sick, but his breathing stayed steady and his color looked better than when he'd first arrived. She let him rest and threw herself into work, needing something to do with her hands while her mind spun through everything he'd told her. 60 days. Still wasn't enough time to come up with $1,800, even if the investigation into Ashford went their way. They'd need a miracle, or at least a very good plan. When Ephraim finally emerged from the cabin, the sun was already past noon. He moved stiff and slow, like every muscle in his body was protesting. Delilah handed him coffee without a word. "How long was I out?" he asked. "Long enough." She watched him drink, noticed the way his hands shook slightly. "You pushed yourself too hard." "Had to." He took another sip, grimaced. "The governor's office doesn't exactly roll out the welcome mat for farmers complaining about loan companies." "Did he believe you?" "Hard to say. Politicians have good poker faces." Ephraim set the cup down, rubbed the back of his neck. "But I got him to agree to send an investigator. Someone who will look at Dakota Loan and Trust's records, interview the people we talk to. If there's fraud, they'll find it. And if they don't find it in time?" He didn't answer right away. They both knew what happened then. The extension would run out, the debt would come due, and all of Ephraim's savings would be gone along with the land. "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it," he said finally. "Right now, we focus on staying afloat." Making sure we've got enough supplies to last through winter, keeping the homestead running. If we lose everything worrying about what might happen, we've already lost. Delilah wanted to argue, wanted to demand a better plan than just waiting and hoping. But she could see the exhaustion still clinging to him, the weight of everything he'd taken on. So she nodded and changed the subject. I need to show you something. She led him inside, pulled out Thomas's journal, and walked him through what she'd found. The entries, the dates, the names of people her late husband had borrowed from. Ephraim studied each page carefully, his expression growing darker. Your husband was in deeper than either of us thought, he said quietly. Some of these names, I recognize them. Card sharks. Confidence men. The kind of people who don't forget debts. You think they might come looking for money too? Maybe. Depends on whether Thomas actually paid them or just ran. He closed the journal, looked at her. Did he have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted to hurt him? The question caught her off guard. I don't know. He didn't talk about his business, and after he died, nobody came around asking questions. Until Ashford. Until Ashford, she agreed. Ephraim was quiet for a moment, turning something over in his mind. What if the second loan Ashford mentioned is real, but Thomas didn't take it out for himself? What do you mean? What if someone else used his name? Forged his signature, borrowed money in his name after he died? Ephraim tapped the journal. If Ashford's willing to inflate one debt, he might be willing to fabricate another entirely, especially if he thought nobody would question it. Delilah felt something cold settle in her stomach. How would we prove that? We'd need to see the paperwork, the actual loan documents, not just Ashford's word. He stood, started pacing. And we'd need a handwriting expert, someone who could compare Thomas's signature on the real loan to the signature on the fake one. That costs money we don't have. Everything costs money we don't have. He stopped pacing, faced her. But if we can prove Ashford forged documents, that's not just fraud. That's criminal. The sheriff would have to act on that. Investigation or no investigation. It was a long shot, but it was something. Delilah felt a flicker of hope, small but stubborn. So, we get the documents. Easier said than done. Ashford's not going to hand them over willingly. Then we take them. Ephraim looked at her sharply. You're talking about breaking into the Dakota Loan and Trust office. I'm talking about getting evidence, whatever it takes. He studied her for a long moment, and she couldn't tell if he was impressed or concerned. Maybe both. That's a hell of a risk. Doing nothing is a bigger risk. Fair point. He ran a hand through his hair, thinking. The office is in town, above the general store. I saw it when I was there last. 2 rooms, barred windows, locked door. We'd need to get in after hours, find the right files, get out without being seen. Can you do it? Can we do it? He corrected. I'm not doing this alone. I don't know anything about breaking into buildings. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. He met her eyes. Together. That word again. Together. It kept coming up between them, weaving itself into every decision, every plan. Delilah had spent so long doing everything alone that the concept still felt foreign. But she was starting to understand it, starting to trust it. When? She asked. Saturday night. Town will be busy with people coming in for supplies, getting drunk at the saloon. Easier to blend in, easier to move around without drawing attention. He paused. We'll need a lookout, someone we can trust. Delilah thought about the people who'd come to the meeting, the ones who'd agreed to fight back against Dakota Loan and Trust. Most of them were too scared or too cautious to risk something like this, but there was one person who might help. Sarah, she said, the widow who lost her farm. She's got nothing left to lose, and she hates Ashford as much as we do. You think she'd be willing? Only one way to find out. They rode out to Sarah's place the next morning. She was living in a shack on the edge of town now, a tiny space barely big enough for a bed and a stove. When she opened the door and saw them standing there, her face went carefully blank. Mrs. Cutter, Mr. Cutter. She didn't invite them in. We need to talk to you about something, Delilah said. Can we come in? Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. The interior of the shack was sparse and cold, with gaps in the walls where the wind whistled through. Delilah's heart ached looking at it. This was what happened when Ashford won. What do you want? Sarah asked, arms crossed. Ephraim laid it out plain. What they suspected about the forged loan, what they planned to do about it. and what they needed from her. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You're asking me to help you commit a crime," she said finally. "We're asking you to help us prove one," Delilah said. "That's a fine distinction that won't mean much if we get caught." Sarah looked at her directly. "I lost everything because of that man. My home, my husband's legacy, my future. I've got nothing left but the shack and my name. If I get arrested, I lose even that." "I know what we're asking," Delilah said quietly, "and I know it's not fair, but if we can prove Ashford's been forging documents, we can take him down. Not just for us, but for everyone he's hurt, including you." Sarah's jaw tightened. "You think that'll bring my farm back?" "No, but it might stop him from taking someone else's." The silence stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable. Then Sarah laughed, short and bitter. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. Coming here, asking me to risk what little I have left." She shook her head. "But you're right, that bastard needs to be stopped. And if this is how we do it, then fine. I'm in." Relief washed through Delilah. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If this goes sideways, we're all going to jail." Sarah looked at Ephraim. "You'd better have a good plan." "Working on it," he said. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Ephraim scouted the Dakota Loan and Trust office, learning the layout, figuring out the best way in and out. Sarah spread word around town that she'd be looking for work Saturday night, establishing an alibi in case anyone asked questions later. Delilah practiced picking the simple lock on their cabin door with a bent wire until her fingers cramped. None of them talked about what would happen if they failed. There was no point. Saturday came too fast. Delilah woke before dawn with her stomach in knots, barely able to choke down breakfast. Ephraim was quieter than usual, his face set in hard lines. They went through the motions of a normal day, feeding the animals, checking the fence line, chopping wood. But everything felt off, like they were playing parts in a show they hadn't rehearsed enough. As the sun started to set, they rode into town. The main street was busy like Ephraim had predicted, wagons and horses crowded outside the general store, men spilling out of the saloon already half drunk. They tied their horses at the edge of town and found Sarah waiting near the church. "You ready?" Ephraim asked her. "As I'll ever be." She looked pale, but determined. "What do you need me to do?" "Keep watch. If you see the sheriff or anyone heading toward the office, you signal us." He handed her a small mirror. "Flash this 3 times. We'll see it from the window and get out." Sarah tucked the mirror into her coat. "And if you get caught anyway?" "Then you don't know us. You were just walking by." "They won't believe that." "Doesn't matter. You can't help us if you're locked up too." Ephraim looked at both of them. Last chance to back out. "Either of you want to walk away, now's the time." Neither of them moved. "All right then." He checked the street, making sure no one was paying attention to them. "Let's go." They split up. Sarah positioned herself across from the Dakota Loan and Trust office, pretending to window shop at the milliner's next door. Ephraim and Delilah circled around to the back of the building where a narrow alley ran between the general store and the saddlery. The office door was locked, just like Ephraim had said. He pulled out a thin piece of metal, worked it into the lock while Delilah kept watch. Seconds ticked by. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack a rib. The lock clicked. Ephraim pushed the door open, gestured for her to follow. They slipped inside and closed the door behind them. The office was dark, lit only by the faint glow of streetlights through the window. Delilah's eyes adjusted slowly, making out the shapes of desks, filing cabinets, shelves stacked with ledgers. The room smelled like ink and old paper. "You take that side, I'll take this one," Ephraim whispered. "Look for anything with Thomas Marsh's name on it." They moved quickly, pulling open drawers, rifling through files. Delilah's hand shook as she flipped through documents, trying to read in the dim light. Loan agreements, payment schedules, foreclosure notices, all of it organized with cold efficiency. She was 3 drawers in when she found it. A folder labeled Marsh Thomas. She pulled it out, opened it. Inside were 2 loan agreements. The first one matched what she'd seen in the county records, $1,000, March of the previous year, Thomas's signature at the bottom. The second one was dated 6 months later, $800. Same terms, same company. And at the bottom, Thomas's signature again. Except it wasn't his signature. Delilah had seen Thomas's handwriting every day for years. She knew the way he looped his letters, the way he crossed his T's too high, the way his S's always leaned left. The signature was close, but it wasn't right. The loops were too tight, the T's too straight. Someone had copied it, but not well enough. "Ephraim," she hissed. He came over, looked at the documents. Even in the dark, she could see his jaw clench. "That's forgery. We need to take this." "No." He shook his head. "If the document disappears, Ashford'll know someone broke in. He'll hide the rest of the evidence, and we'll have nothing." "Then what do we do?" Ephraim thought for a moment, then pulled out a small notebook and pencil from his coat. "We copy it, get every detail down, the date, the terms, the signature, then we put it back and get out." Delilah held the paper steady while he copied, his handwriting quick and precise. She kept glancing at the window, expecting to see Sarah's signal any second, but the street outside stayed quiet. Ephraim finished, tucked the notebook away. Delilah put the folder back exactly where she'd found it, making sure everything looked undisturbed. They were about to leave when Ephraim stopped, looking at something on the main desk. "What?" Delilah whispered. He picked up a ledger, flipped it open. His face went hard. "This is a client list. Every person Dakota Loan and Trust has loaned money to in the past 5 years. So half these names have foreclosed written next to them, and the other half have balances that don't match what they actually borrowed." He looked at her. "This is systematic. Ashford's not just targeting a few people. He's running a scheme across the entire territory. We need to take this. We can't. Same problem. If it goes missing, he'll know. Then we copy as much as we can." They worked fast, Ephraim writing down names and numbers while Delilah kept watch. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Her nerves were so raw she jumped at every sound from the street below. Finally, Ephraim closed the ledger, put it back. "That's enough. We need to go." They moved to the door, and that's when Delilah saw it. 3 flashes of light from across the street, Sarah's signal. "Someone's coming," she breathed. Ephraim swore under his breath, looked around. The office had 2 doors, the one they'd come through and one that led to the main stairs. If they tried to go out the back now, they'd run right into whoever was coming up. If they went down the front stairs, they'd be seen for sure. "The window," Ephraim said. "It's barred." "I know, but there's a ledge. We can get onto the roof of the general store, wait until whoever it is leaves." It was insane. The ledge was barely 6 inches wide, and the drop to the alley below was at least 15 feet. But they didn't have a choice. Ephraim forced the window open as quietly as he could. Cold air rushed in. He climbed out first, balanced on the ledge, then reached back for Delilah. She took his hand and followed, trying not to look down. They'd just gotten the window closed when they heard footsteps on the stairs. Delilah pressed herself against the wall, hardly breathing. Through the glass, she could see a figure enter the office. Leonard Ashford, carrying a lantern. He set it on the desk, started pulling out files. He was working. At 10 o'clock at night, he was working. Ephraim met her eyes, and she could see the same thought in his expression. If Ashford decided to look out the window, if he saw them standing there, but he didn't. He sat at the desk with his back to them, focused on whatever he was writing. Minutes passed. Delilah's legs started to cramp from standing so still. The ledge was slippery with frost, and her hands were going numb. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ashford stood. He gathered his papers, picked up the lantern, and left. They heard his footsteps descending the stairs, heard the front door open and close. Delilah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That was too close. "Yeah." Ephraim looked down at the alley. "Come on. Let's get out of here before our luck runs out." They climbed onto the roof of the general store, made their way to the back, and dropped down into the alley. Delilah's ankle twisted when she landed, sending a spike of pain up her leg, but she bit back the cry and kept moving. They found Sarah 2 streets over, pale and shaking. "I saw him go in. I thought he'd caught you." "He didn't," Ephraim said. "You did good." "Did you find anything?" "Yeah." He patted the notebook in his pocket. "Enough to bury him." They split up again, each taking a different route back to the horses. Delilah limped through the dark streets, her heart still racing, adrenaline making her hands shake. When she finally reached the spot where they'd left the horses, Ephraim was already there, checking the saddle. "Your ankle," he said, noticing the way she favored her left leg. "It's fine." "It's not fine, let me see." He knelt, unlaced her boot carefully. Her ankle was already swelling, purple bruises blooming under the skin. He touched it gently, testing for breaks. She hissed in pain. "Not broken," he said, "but you need to stay off it for a few days." "We don't have a few days. We have tonight." He stood, helped her onto her horse. "Once we get home, you're resting. No arguments." She was too tired to argue anyway. The ride back to the homestead was cold and silent. By the time they arrived, Delilah could barely stand. Ephraim half carried her inside, got her settled on the bed, and brought her water and willow bark for the pain. "We did it," she said quietly. "We did." He sat beside her, exhaustion written in every line of his face. "Now we just need to figure out what to do with it. We take it to the sheriff, show him the proof. And if he doesn't believe us, if he thinks we're making it up, then we go over his head, straight to the territorial marshal." Delilah looked at him. "You said the governor sent an investigator." "We find that investigator. Give them everything we've got." Ephraim nodded slowly. "It might work. It has to work." He was quiet for a moment, then reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough, warm, solid. "I need you to know something. If this goes wrong, if we lose everything, it was worth it. Fighting back was worth it. Don't talk like that. I mean it." He squeezed her hand. "I've spent my whole life taking the path of least resistance, drifting from place to place, never putting down roots, never fighting for anything that mattered. But this, it matters. And I'd rather lose fighting than win by rolling over." Something broke open inside Delilah's chest. Not love, not yet, but something close, something real. She squeezed his hand back, unable to find words big enough for what she was feeling. "Thank you," she said finally, "for all of it. Don't thank me yet, we're not out of this." But he smiled, small and tired and genuine. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we figure out the next move." He started to pull away, but she held on to his hand. "Stay." He looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "You sure?" "I'm sure." So he stayed, lay down beside her, still holding her hand, close enough that she could feel his warmth. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, Delilah felt something like safety. Not because the danger was gone, it wasn't, but because she wasn't facing it alone anymore. She fell asleep with his hand in hers, and for once she didn't dream of losing everything. Morning came with the smell of snow in the air. Delilah woke to find Ephraim already up, stoking the fire, coffee brewing on the stove. Her ankle throbbed when she tried to put weight on it, a sharp reminder of the previous night's escape. "Stay off that," Ephraim said without turning around. "I'll bring you breakfast." "I can walk." "Didn't say you couldn't. Said you shouldn't." He poured coffee, brought it to her along with bread and eggs. "We've got work to do today, and you're no good to me hobbling around making it worse." She wanted to argue, but knew he was right. So she ate and drank and watched him move around the cabin with that same efficient purpose he brought to everything. It still surprised her sometimes, how easily they'd fallen into this rhythm. How natural it felt to wake up and find him there. "What's the plan?" she asked. Ephraim sat across from her, pulled out the notebook where he'd copied the information from Ashford's office. "I've been thinking about it. The sheriff's not going to help us. He's either in Ashford's pocket or too scared of the loan company to make waves. So we skip him entirely." "And go straight to the territorial marshal?" "Not quite." He tapped the notebook. "The governor sent an investigator, someone named William Cross. He's supposed to be interviewing people about Dakota Loan and Trust, gathering evidence. If we can find him, give him what we've got, he'll have everything he needs to shut Ashford down." "You know where this Cross is?" "Last I heard he was in Bismarck, but that was a week ago. He could be anywhere by now." Ephraim looked at her. "I'll have to ride out, track him down. Could take a few days." Delilah's stomach clenched. "You're leaving again." "I don't have a choice. This evidence doesn't mean anything if we can't get it to the right person." He hesitated. "Unless you want to come with me." "I can barely walk." "I know, that's why I'm asking. If you want to wait here, I understand, but I need to know you'll be safe." She thought about it. The cabin was isolated, hard to reach, but not impossible. If Ashford got suspicious, if he decided to come looking while Ephraim was gone, she'd be alone and injured. On the other hand, traveling with a twisted ankle would slow them both down, maybe cost them time they couldn't afford to lose. "I'll stay," she said finally, "but I want that rifle within reach, and I want you back as fast as you can manage." "Deal." He stood, started gathering supplies. "I'll leave you enough wood to keep the fire going, enough food for a week. If anyone comes around asking questions, you don't know anything. I went hunting, you're not sure when I'll be back. And if Ashford shows up, then you point the rifle at him and you don't let him inside. Don't talk to him. Don't negotiate. Don't give him an inch." Ephraim's voice was hard. "If he tries to force his way in, you shoot. Understand?" She nodded, though the thought of actually pulling the trigger made her hands go cold. Ephraim left within the hour, the notebook tucked safely in his coat, his horse loaded with enough supplies for a long ride. Delilah stood in the doorway and watched him go, feeling that familiar ache of being left behind. But this time was different. This time, she knew he was coming back. The first day alone passed slowly. Delilah kept herself busy with small tasks, mending clothes, organizing supplies, cleaning the rifle and learning its weight in her hands. Her ankle hurt less when she stayed off it, but the forced inactivity made her restless. She kept looking out the window, half expecting to see Ashford riding up the path. But no one came. The second day was worse. The isolation pressed in on her, made every sound outside seem suspicious. She jumped at the wind rattling the shutters, at the creak of the barn door, at the distant cry of a hawk. By evening, her nerves were so raw she could barely eat. She went to bed early, the rifle propped against the wall within arm's reach. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by dreams of men on horseback and papers covered in numbers she couldn't read. On the third day, someone finally came. Delilah heard the hoofbeats mid-morning and scrambled for the rifle, her heart hammering. She positioned herself by the window where she could see out without being seen, finger on the trigger. But it wasn't Ashford. It was Sarah. Delilah opened the door, relief flooding through her. "What are you doing here?" "Checking on you." Sarah dismounted, tied her horse. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes. "Word around town is that Ashford's been asking questions, wondering if anyone saw anything unusual Saturday night." Delilah's stomach dropped. "Did he mention us?" "Not by name, but he's suspicious. And when Ashford gets suspicious, people tend to get hurt." Sarah came inside, looked around. "Where's your husband?" "Bismarck. Tracking down the investigator." "When's he coming back?" "I don't know. Soon, I hope." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then pulled something from her coat. A newspaper, folded to show a small article on the inside page. "You should see this." Delilah took it, read the headline. "Territorial investigation into lending practices underway." The article was brief. Just a few paragraphs about how the governor's office was looking into complaints about predatory loans in the Dakota Territory. It mentioned William Cross by name, said he was conducting interviews and reviewing financial records. "This is good," Delilah said. "It means people are paying attention." "Maybe." Sarah didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe it means Ashford knows he's running out of time. Men like him don't go down quiet, they fight back." "Let him fight. We've got evidence now. Once Ephraim gets it to Cross—" "If he gets it to Cross," Sarah cut her off. "If Cross is willing to listen, if the evidence is enough, that's a lot of ifs, Delilah." "You got a better plan?" "No. I'm just saying, don't count on this working out neat and tidy. Nothing ever does." Sarah moved to the window, looked out at the empty yard. "You need to be ready for the possibility that Ashford comes here before your husband gets back. You need a plan for that." Delilah gestured to the rifle. "I've got a plan. Shooting a man's not as easy as you think, especially not when he's standing on your doorstep with legal papers and a smile." Sarah turned to face her. "I know you're tough, but tough doesn't stop a bullet, and it doesn't stop the law from siding with the man who's got money and connections." "Then what am I supposed to do?" "You run. You take what you can carry, and you get out. Go stay with someone in town. Find somewhere Ashford can't corner you alone. This is my home. I'm not abandoning it." "Better to abandon a home than die defending it," Sarah's voice was sharp. "I lost my farm trying to stand my ground. Don't make the same mistake I did." The words hit harder than Delilah expected. She looked at Sarah, this woman who'd already lost everything, and saw her own possible future staring back, broken, homeless, defeated. "I'm not you," Delilah said quietly. "Not yet." Sarah picked up her coat. "But you could be. We all could be. That's what Ashford does. He breaks people down until there's nothing left." She left after that, and Delilah was alone again with her thoughts and her fears and the rifle that suddenly felt heavier than it had before. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound, her mind running through scenarios. What would she actually do if Ashford showed up? Could she really pull the trigger? And if she did, what then? She'd be arrested, thrown in jail, and the land would be lost anyway. Sarah was right. Fighting back wasn't as simple as being willing to fight. Dawn came gray and cold. Delilah forced herself to eat, though the food tasted like ash. She was checking the woodpile when she heard it again. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses this time. Her blood went cold. She ran inside, grabbed the rifle, positioned herself where she could see the path. 3 riders came into view. The one in front was Ashford, his thin frame unmistakable even from a distance. Behind him were 2 men she didn't recognize. Big, hard-looking, the kind hired for muscle, not conversation. Delilah's hands started shaking. This wasn't a social visit. They stopped in the yard. Ashford dismounted, smooth and unhurried, while his men stayed on their horses. He looked at the cabin, at the closed door, and smiled. "Mrs. Cutter," he called out, "I know you're in there. We need to talk." Delilah didn't answer. Her finger rested on the trigger, her breathing shallow. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Ashford continued. "I just have some questions about Saturday night, about who might have been near my office." Still, she said nothing. Ashford's smile faded. "I can wait here all day if I need to, or we can make this easy. You come out, we talk, and I go on my way. Nobody gets hurt." Delilah's mind raced. If she stayed inside, he'd eventually force his way in or set the place on fire to smoke her out. If she went out, she'd be outnumbered 3-1. Either way, she was trapped. She opened the door a crack, the rifle visible in her hands. "Say what you came to say and leave." Ashford's eyebrows rose. "That's not very neighborly." "We're not neighbors, and you're trespassing." "Am I?" He pulled a paper from his coat, held it up. "According to the terms of your loan, I have the right to inspect the property to ensure it's being maintained properly. So technically, I'm well within my rights to be here." "My husband's not home." "I noticed. Convenient timing, him being gone right when someone broke into my office." Ashford took a step closer. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "No." "No?" He smiled again, cold and knowing. "That's strange, because a witness saw 2 people leaving the building through the back alley. A man and a woman, and another woman keeping watch across the street." Delilah's heart stopped. Someone had seen them. After everything, all their caution, someone had seen them. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Of course you don't." Ashford gestured to one of his men. "Mr. Hayes here is very good at helping people remember things they've forgotten. Maybe he should come inside, jog your memory a bit." The man called Hayes started to dismount. Delilah raised the rifle, aimed it square at his chest. "Take another step and I'll shoot." Hayes froze. Ashford laughed, actually laughed. "You're not going to shoot anyone, Mrs. Cutter. You're scared and alone and in over your head. Put the gun down before someone gets hurt. The only person getting hurt is whoever tries to come through this door." Brave words. Ashford's smile disappeared entirely now. "But words don't pay debts, and your debt is coming due in less than 50 days, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me where your husband is and what he's doing. You're going to hand over anything he might have taken from my office, and then maybe, I'll consider extending your deadline again." "Go to hell." Ashford's face went hard. "Wrong answer." He nodded to his men. "Search the property. If she shoots, shoot back." Both men dismounted. Delilah's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the rifle. She'd never shot anyone before, never even fired at a living thing. But as Hayes moved toward the barn and the other man started for the cabin, she knew she was out of options. She pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, kicked up dirt 5 feet from Hayes. The sound was deafening, echoing across the empty land. Both men stopped, hands going to their guns. "Next one won't miss," Delilah said, though her voice shook. Ashford held up a hand, stopping his men from drawing. "Careful, Mrs. Cutter. Shooting at a man's one thing. Shooting at a lawman's another. You're not the law. No. But Sheriff Morrison deputized my associates here just this morning. So if you shoot them, you're shooting officers of the law. That's a hanging offense. Delilah felt the world tilt. He'd planned this. Come prepared for her to fight back, made sure the law would be on his side no matter what happened. Now, Ashford said, voice soft and dangerous. Put down the gun, or I'll have my men burn this cabin to the ground with you inside it. She believed him. Looking into his eyes, she absolutely believed him. The rifle suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Delilah's arms trembled. She couldn't win this. Not alone, not outnumbered, not when the law itself had been bought and paid for. She was about to lower the rifle when she heard it. More hoofbeats, coming fast from the direction of town. Ashford heard it too. He turned, hand going to his gun. 4 riders came around the bend. The one in front wore a marshal's badge that caught the morning light. Behind him were 3 men with rifles already drawn. The marshal reined in his horse, took in the scene with sharp eyes. What's going on here? Ashford recovered quickly, his smile sliding back into place. Marshal Cross. What a pleasant surprise. We were just... I asked what's going on here. Cross's voice cut through the air like a blade. He was younger than Delilah expected, maybe 35, with the kind of face that didn't waste time on pleasantries. Why is this woman holding a rifle on you? A misunderstanding, I assure you. I'm Leonard Ashford, representing Dakota Loan and Trust. This property is under our lien, and I was simply conducting an inspection. With armed men? For protection. These territories can be dangerous. Cross looked at Delilah. That true, ma'am? You just here for an inspection? Delilah's throat was so tight she could barely speak. He was threatening me. Said he'd burn the cabin down if I didn't cooperate. That's a lie, Ashford said smoothly. She's clearly distressed, probably not thinking clearly. I'm thinking fine. Delilah's voice came out stronger now. He's trying to intimidate me because he knows my husband has evidence of fraud. Evidence that proves Ashford's been forging loan documents and stealing land. Cross's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. That's a serious accusation. It's absurd, Ashford said. This woman is in default on a legitimate debt. She's making up stories to avoid payment. Maybe. Cross dismounted, walked closer to Ashford. But funny thing is, I've been hearing similar stories all week. About loans that don't add up, signatures that don't match, debts that appear out of nowhere. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Mr. Ashford? For the first time, Ashford looked uncertain. I conduct my business according to the law. We'll see about that. Cross turned to his men. Disarm these 2, take them into custody for questioning. On what charge? Ashford demanded. Attempted intimidation of a witness. That'll do for now. Cross looked back at Delilah. Your husband, is he Ephraim Cutter? Yes? He's been looking for me. Found me in Bismarck yesterday. Gave me a whole notebook full of information about your friend here. Cross gestured to Ashford. Names, dates, amounts, even copied signatures that don't match the originals. Pretty compelling stuff. Relief hit Delilah so hard her knees almost gave out. Ephraim had found him. He'd actually found him. Ashford's face had gone pale. That information was obtained illegally. Breaking and entering doesn't matter how it was obtained if it's true. Cross nodded to his men, and they moved forward to take Ashford and his associates into custody. You'll have a chance to defend yourself, but right now, you're coming with me. Ashford's eyes locked on Delilah, and the hatred in them was so pure it made her skin crawl. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. Cross took Ashford's arm, none too gently. It's very over. They rode away, taking Ashford and his men with them. Delilah stood in the doorway, still holding the rifle, watching until they disappeared from sight. Then her legs finally gave out, and she sat down hard on the steps. She'd won. They'd actually won. She was still sitting there when Ephraim rode up an hour later, his face drawn with exhaustion and worry. He was off his horse before it fully stopped, crossing the yard in long strides. I saw Cross and his men on the road, he said. They had Ashford with them. What happened? Delilah told him everything. Ashford's visit, the threats, the standoff, Cross showing up just in time. Ephraim listened without interrupting, his expression getting darker with every word. When she finished, he sat beside her on the steps, close enough that their shoulders touched. I should have been here. You were exactly where you needed to be. If you hadn't found Cross, Ashford would have hurt you. His voice was rough, or worse. But he didn't, because you did your job and I did mine, and it worked. She looked at him. We won, Ephraim? Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. Cross has to prove the fraud, build a case. That could take months. But he's investigating. That's more than we had before. Ephraim was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the land they'd fought so hard to keep. Cross told me something else, about the debt. What about it? The extension I got, the 60 days, it's contingent on the investigation. If Cross finds proof of fraud, the debt gets nullified. We won't owe anything. Delilah's breath caught. Are you serious? That's what he said. It's not guaranteed, but if the case is as strong as he thinks, Dakota Loan and Trust will be dissolved and all their loans declared invalid. So we just have to wait. Yeah, we wait. He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not just determination or partnership, but something softer, something that made her chest ache. I know waiting's not easy, but we've made it this far. We can make it a little further. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They sat there together on the steps, watching the sun climb higher, and for the first time in months, Delilah let herself believe that things might actually work out. The next few weeks were strange, quiet. They went back to their routines, fixing things, preparing for winter, working the land, but everything felt different now, lighter, like a weight had been lifted that Delilah hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. Cross came by twice to ask follow-up questions, take statements, gather more evidence. He was thorough and professional, treating them with a respect that felt foreign after months of being dismissed and threatened. The case is strong, he told them on his second visit. Ashford kept meticulous records, probably never thought anyone would see them. We've got proof of at least 15 forged signatures, maybe more, and the pattern of foreclosures is damning. You folks did good work. When will you know for sure? Ephraim asked. Few more weeks. I've got to present everything to the territorial judge, get official warrants issued. But barring something unexpected, Ashford's going to jail and Dakota Loan and Trust is going to be shut down. After he left, Delilah and Ephraim just looked at each other. No words necessary. They'd done it. Actually done it. That night, lying in bed, Delilah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but the quiet knowledge that things were going to be okay, that they'd fought and won and survived. Ephraim, she said quietly. Yeah? Thank you for everything. He was quiet for a moment. Then his hand found hers in the dark, squeezed gently. Don't thank me. We did this together. Still, you could have walked away at any point, but you didn't. Neither did you. She smiled in the darkness. Guess we're both stubborn. Guess so. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, gentle and absent-minded. Delilah, I need to tell you something. Her heart skipped. What? This whole thing, the marriage, the partnership, all of it. I know we went into it as a practical arrangement, no expectations, no promises beyond survival. I remember. But somewhere along the way it stopped being practical for me. His voice was careful, like he was testing each word before speaking it. I don't know when exactly. Maybe when you agreed to break into Ashford's office with me. Maybe when you stood in that doorway with a rifle, ready to shoot anyone who tried to hurt what we'd built. But it changed, and I need you to know that. Delilah's throat tightened. Changed how? I care about you, not as a partner or an arrangement, as a person, as my wife. He paused. If that's something you don't want, if you'd rather keep things the way they were, I understand, but I needed to say it. She lay there in the dark, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. A month ago, maybe even a week ago, she would have panicked, would have pulled away, protected herself, kept that distance that had always felt safer than vulnerability. But things were different now. She was different. It changed for me too, she said quietly. I don't know when. But it did. She felt him shift beside her, turning to face her. Yeah? Yeah. She squeezed his hand. I'm not good at this. At letting people in. Thomas. He burned that out of me. Made me think trusting someone was just asking to get hurt. I'm not Thomas. I know. That's the scary part. She took a breath. But I want to try. If you're willing to be patient with me. I've got nothing but patience. His voice was warm now, relieved. We'll figure it out together, like everything else. Together, she echoed. He pulled her closer, and she went willingly, fitting herself against him. His arms came around her, solid and sure, and Delilah felt something inside her finally relax, finally let go of the fear she'd been carrying for so long. This was what safety felt like. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of someone who'd stand with you when danger came. She fell asleep in his arms, and for the first time in her life, she didn't dream of being alone. Winter came hard that year, early and unforgiving. Snow fell in thick curtains that turned the world white and silent, drifts piling so high against the cabin that Ephraim had to dig them out every morning just to open the door. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the bucket overnight, and the wind howled like something alive and angry. But inside the cabin, things were warm. Delilah had never experienced a winter like this. Not the weather, but the feeling of not facing it alone. There was something almost peaceful about being snowed in with another person, about the forced closeness that came from sharing a small space through long, dark evenings. They cooked together, ate together, worked on small projects together. Ephraim taught her how to carve wood, how to mend harness leather properly, how to play cards without losing every hand. She taught him how to make bread that didn't come out hard as stone, how to darn socks so the stitches didn't rub blisters, how to tell stories that made the hours pass faster. They talked more than they ever had before, about everything and nothing. Ephraim told her about the places he'd been before settling here, mining camps in Colorado, cattle drives in Texas, a brief stint working on the railroad that nearly killed him. Delilah talked about her childhood in Missouri, about parents she'd lost young, about marrying Thomas more out of loneliness than love, and realizing too late what a mistake it had been. "You ever regret it?" Ephraim asked one night as they sat by the fire, his hands busy with a piece of wood he was shaping into a new axe handle. Marrying him, I mean. Delilah thought about it. A few months ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. But now, sitting here in this cabin they'd fought so hard to keep, she wasn't sure anymore. "I regret the pain," she said slowly. "The lies, the disappointment, the way he left me to clean up his mess. But if I hadn't married him, I wouldn't have ended up here. Wouldn't have met you. So maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was just the hard road to something better." Ephraim looked up from his carving, eyes steady on hers. "You really believe that?" "I'm starting to." He smiled, small and genuine, and went back to his work. But his hand found hers later that night when they climbed into bed and she held on tight. The word from Marshall Cross came in February, delivered by a courier who'd braved the snow-packed roads to reach them. Delilah's hands shook as she broke the seal on the envelope, her heart hammering. She read it once, then again, not quite believing what she was seeing. "What's it say?" Ephraim asked, moving to stand beside her. "The case is closed. Ashford's been convicted of fraud, forgery, and theft. Dakota Loan and Trust is being dissolved." She looked up at him, tears blurring her vision. "All their loans have been nullified. We don't owe anything. The land is ours, free and clear." For a moment, Ephraim didn't react. Then he let out a long, shaky breath and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face against his chest and let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from relief so overwhelming it had nowhere else to go. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "Yeah." His voice was rough. "We did." They held each other for a long time, the letter crumpled between them, the fire crackling in the background. When Delilah finally pulled back, Ephraim's eyes were wet too. "I need to tell you something else," she said quietly. He wiped his face, tried to compose himself. "What?" "I've been feeling strange lately, tired, sick in the mornings. I thought maybe I was just run down from everything that's happened, but—" She took a breath. "I think I might be pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Ephraim went very still, his expression unreadable. "You think or you know?" he asked carefully. "I'm pretty sure. All the signs are there. I haven't wanted to say anything until I was certain." "How long?" "Maybe 2 months. It's hard to tell." Ephraim sat down heavily in the nearest chair, like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. Delilah felt her stomach clench. This wasn't the reaction she'd hoped for. "If this isn't what you want," she started, "if it's too soon, or if it's not that." He looked up at her, and there was something raw in his face. "I wanted this. I told you from the beginning that I wanted a family, But I need you to understand something, Delilah. I need you to really hear this. She sat down across from him, heart in her throat. I'm listening. When I proposed this arrangement, when I asked you to marry me, I wanted children. I thought that's what would make it all worthwhile. Building something that would last beyond us, leaving a legacy. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But things changed. You changed it. And now, sitting here, thinking about you carrying our child, I realized something. What? If it doesn't happen, if you lose this baby, or if there are no more after this, or if you can't have children at all, it doesn't change how I feel about you. It doesn't make this marriage any less real or important. His eyes met hers. I married you for the future I thought I wanted, but I'm staying married to you because I want you, just you. Everything else is extra. Delilah felt something break open in her chest. Not the crack of breaking apart, but the breaking open of something that had been locked too tight for too long. She'd been so afraid of this moment, so terrified that pregnancy would turn her into just a means to an end, a vessel for the family he'd wanted. But he was telling her the opposite, that she mattered more than any of it. I want this baby, she said quietly. But I'm scared. Thomas and we tried for years. Nothing ever happened. I thought maybe I couldn't, or maybe he couldn't, or maybe we just weren't meant to. And then he died, and it didn't matter anymore. She looked down at her hands. What if I lose it? What if something goes wrong? Then we deal with it together. Ephraim reached across the table, took her hands in his. No blame, no regret, just us figuring it out. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. He squeezed her hands. I love you, Delilah. That's the simple part. Everything else is just details. The words landed like a physical thing, warm and solid and real. I love you. He'd never said it before. She hadn't either. They danced around it, implied it, shown it in 100 different ways, but hearing it out loud made it different, made it true. I love you too, she said, and felt the truth of it in her bones. Ephraim stood, pulled her up and into his arms. She held on tight, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, and let herself believe that this time things might actually work out. Spring came slowly, melting the snow inch by reluctant inch. The land emerged muddy and raw, but alive. Green shoots pushed through the thawing ground. Birds returned, filling the air with sound. The world was waking up, and so was Delilah. Her body changed in ways that were both familiar and strange. Her belly grew round and firm. Her clothes stopped fitting. Her back ached in new ways. But there was also a kind of rightness to it, a feeling of becoming something she was always meant to be. Ephraim was careful with her, almost too careful. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, wouldn't let her climb ladders or ride horses, or do half the work she'd always done. It drove her crazy sometimes, but she also knew it came from love, not control. So she let him fuss and tried not to snap when he insisted on doing things she was perfectly capable of handling herself. They prepared the cabin for a baby, cleared out a corner for a cradle, washed and mended tiny clothes that Sarah had donated from her own children years ago, gathered supplies they'd need for the birth. Ephraim built a rocking chair from scratch, sanding it smooth and perfect, refusing to let Delilah see it until it was finished. It's beautiful, she said when he finally showed her, running her hands over the curved arms, the carefully fitted joints. It's functional, he's corrected, but she could see the pride in his face. She sat in it, tested the motion. It rocked smooth and even, gentle enough for a sleeping baby, sturdy enough to last generations. Our grandchildren will use this chair. That's the idea. He watched her rock, something soft in his expression. You're going to be a good mother. I don't know about that. I do. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen you fight for things that matter, and nothing's going to matter more than that baby. He nodded toward her belly. You'll figure it out. We both will. As the due date drew closer, Delilah found herself thinking more and more about what kind of life this child would have. She wanted to give them everything she'd never had: stability, security, parents who stayed. But she also knew the world didn't work that way. Life was hard and unpredictable, and there were no guarantees. All she could do was promise to show up, to fight when fighting was needed, to bend when bending was required, and to love without conditions or limits. It was more than her own parents had managed, more than Thomas had been willing to give. It would have to be enough. The baby came on a warm May morning, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Delilah woke to pain that took her breath away, sharp and insistent, radiating from her belly through her entire body. She gripped Ephraim's arm hard enough to bruise. "It's time," she gasped. He was up and moving before the words fully left her mouth, building up the fire, boiling water, sending their neighbor's teenage son racing to town for the midwife. But the baby had other plans. By the time the midwife arrived 2 hours later, the child was already born. A girl, small and red-faced and screaming her lungs out. Ephraim had delivered her himself, his hands shaking but steady, following the midwife's instructions that Delilah remembered from helping with births back in Missouri. He'd been terrified. She could see it in every line of his face, but he'd done it anyway, done what needed doing. "You've got a daughter," he said, wrapping the baby in clean cloth and placing her in Delilah's arms. His voice cracked on the word daughter. Delilah looked down at the tiny face, the dark eyes that seemed to see everything and nothing, the miniature fingers that gripped her thumb with surprising strength. Something fierce and protective surged through her, so powerful it made her previous fears seem small. "Hello," she whispered. "I'm your mother." The baby stopped crying, as if she recognized the voice she'd been hearing for months. Ephraim sat beside them on the bed, one arm around Delilah, one finger stroking the baby's impossibly soft cheek. "What should we name her?" Delilah asked. They'd talked about names before, made lists, debated options. But now, looking at this actual person, none of those names seemed right. "Hope," Ephraim said quietly. "Because that's what she is. What all of this is." Delilah thought about it. Hope. It was a simple name, maybe too simple, but it fit. This baby, this life, this future they'd fought so hard for, it was all built on hope. The hope that things could be better, that people could change, that love was worth the risk. "Hope," she agreed. Hope Cutter. The midwife arrived 10 minutes later, flustered and apologetic for being late. She checked both mother and baby, declared them healthy despite the early arrival, and showed Delilah how to feed the baby properly. Then she left, shaking her head and muttering about babies who couldn't wait for professional help. Alone again, the three of them settled into the quiet. Hope nursed and slept and woke and cried, following rhythms only she understood. Delilah was exhausted, sore in places she didn't know existed, but also strangely energized. She'd done this, created life, brought it into the world, and survived the process. "You were amazing," Ephraim said, lying beside her, careful not to jostle the baby. I was terrified. "You were both." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you." "For what?" "For this. For her. For giving me a family when I'd given up on ever having one." Delilah felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was too stubborn to see what was right in front of me." They lay there together, watching Hope sleep, listening to her tiny breaths. Outside, the world continued on. The sun rose and set, the seasons turned, other people fought their own battles. But inside this cabin, time felt suspended, like they existed in a bubble of peace that nothing could touch. Of course, it couldn't last forever. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of learning how to care for a creature who seemed impossibly fragile and surprisingly resilient at the same time. Delilah's body healed slowly, and she was grateful for Ephraim's help, for the way he took on tasks without being asked, for the gentle way he held Hope when Delilah needed to rest. But there were hard moments, too. Times when the baby cried for hours, and nothing they did seemed to help. Times when Delilah felt so overwhelmed she wanted to scream. Times when old fears crept back in, whispering that she wasn't good enough, strong enough, patient enough for this. Ephraim talked her through those moments, reminded her that nobody was perfect, that every parent felt lost sometimes, that making mistakes didn't mean failing. And slowly, she started to believe him. One evening, as summer settled over the land, Delilah stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching Ephraim work in the garden while Hope slept against her chest in a sling. The homestead looked different now than it had a year ago. The barn stood straight and strong, the roof didn't leak, the fence line was solid. They'd added a chicken coop, expanded the garden, built a small smokehouse for preserving meat. But more than the physical changes, something else was different. The place felt lived in, loved, like a home instead of just a shelter. Sarah rode up the path, dismounted near the garden. She'd been coming by once a week, bringing supplies, checking on the baby, slowly rebuilding the friendship that had formed during their fight against Ashford. "How's motherhood treating you?" she asked, peering at Hope's sleeping face. "It's harder than I expected and easier at the same time, if that makes sense." "Perfect sense," Sarah smiled. "She's beautiful." "She is." Delilah adjusted the sling. "I heard you got your farm back." "Part of it. The bank that financed Dakota Loan and Trust is trying to make things right. They can't undo everything, but they're compensating people who lost property to fraud." Sarah's expression was complicated. "It's not the same as it was, but it's something." "Are you going to rebuild?" "Thinking about it. Haven't decided yet." She looked at Delilah. "I'm also thinking about what you said, about stopping Ashford from hurting other people. There are a lot of folks out there getting squeezed by loan companies, not all of them as obviously crooked as Dakota Loan and Trust. Someone needs to help them." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe I've found a new purpose, helping people fight back against predatory lenders, learning the law, understanding the system, using it against the people who abuse it." Sarah shrugged. "I can't be a lawyer, not as a woman, but I can work with lawyers, gather evidence, organize people, make myself useful." Delilah felt a surge of admiration. "You'd be good at that. Maybe. Or maybe I'll fail spectacularly, but at least I'll have tried." Sarah reached out, touched Hope's tiny hand. "That's the thing I learned from all this. Trying matters. Even when the odds are bad and the outcome's uncertain, the act of fighting back, it means something." After Sarah left, Delilah thought about those words. About trying, about fighting, about refusing to accept defeat even when defeat seemed inevitable. She thought about all the moments over the past year when giving up would have been easier than continuing, when walking away would have hurt less than standing her ground. But she hadn't walked away. And neither had Ephraim. They'd stayed and fought and built something real from the wreckage of her first marriage and his wandering life. That night, after Hope was asleep in her cradle and the cabin was quiet, Delilah and Ephraim sat together on the porch, watching the stars come out. The air was warm and soft, carrying the scent of grass and growing things. "What are you thinking about?" Ephraim asked. "Everything. How far we've come. How different things are now." "Any regrets?" She thought about it honestly. "No, not about this. About us. There are things I wish had been different. I wish Thomas hadn't left me such a mess. I wish we hadn't had to fight so hard just to keep what should have been ours. But the outcome?" She leaned against him. "No regrets." "Good, because I need to tell you something." Her stomach clenched. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least I hope it's not." He took her hand. "I got a letter from a land agent in Wyoming Territory. There's an opportunity there, a bigger spread, better grazing, more water. It's rough land, would take a lot of work to make it productive, but it could be something." Delilah's first instinct was panic. Leave? After everything they'd done to keep this place? But then she looked at the homestead, really looked at it, and realized something. It wasn't the land that mattered. It was what they'd built together, the trust, the partnership, the family. That could go anywhere. "Do you want to go?" she asked. "I want us to decide together. This isn't my choice or your choice. It's ours." "What does your gut say?" He was quiet for a moment. "My gut says we've proven we can make it here. Maybe it's time to prove we can make it somewhere else too. Build something even bigger, start fresh without all the baggage of what happened before." "When would we leave?" "Next spring? After Hope's a little older, after we've had time to prepare properly." Delilah thought about starting over, about packing up everything and heading into unknown territory. A year ago, the idea would have terrified her. But now, with Ephraim beside her and Hope sleeping inside, it just felt like the next chapter. "Let's do it," she said. He looked at her, surprised. "Yeah?" "Yeah, we'll finish what we started here, get through the winter, then head west in spring. Together." Ephraim pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. Together. They sat there for a long time, planning and dreaming, talking about what they'd take and what they'd leave behind, about the life they'd build in a new place with new possibilities. And Delilah realized something she'd never quite understood before. Home wasn't a place. It It wasn't four walls and a roof, wasn't land or buildings or possessions. Home was the people you chose to stand beside when everything went wrong. Home was the hand that held yours in the dark, the voice that talked you through the fear, the presence that made even the hardest days bearable. Home was Ephraim and Hope, and the future they were building together, one day at a time. The seasons turned. Summer faded into fall, fall into winter. Hope grew, changing almost daily, learning to smile and laugh and reach for things. The homestead prepared for another winter, stronger this time, better stocked, more secure. And through it all, Delilah and Ephraim worked side by side, partners in the truest sense. They argued sometimes, disagreed about small things, and occasionally big ones. They had bad days when the work felt endless and the future uncertain. They had moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if they were doing anything right. But they also had moments of joy, of watching Hope discover her hands for the first time, of sitting together at the end of a long day, tired but satisfied, of waking up next to each other and choosing, again, to stay. Because that's what love was, Delilah realized. Not the dramatic declarations or grand gestures, not the easy parts when everything aligned perfectly. Love was the daily choice to show up, to try, to forgive the mistakes and celebrate the victories and keep moving forward together. It was choosing partnership over pride, trust over fear, hope over despair. It was building something real from the wreckage of what came before, and believing it could last. On a cold March morning, as they prepared for the journey west, Delilah stood in the cabin one last time, looking at the space that had sheltered them through so much. The cradle Ephraim had built sat empty now. Hope had outgrown it, was sleeping in a bigger bed they'd take with them. The rocking chair was loaded in the wagon, along with everything else they'd need for the trip. "You ready?" Ephraim asked from the doorway. Delilah took one last look around, committing it all to memory. Then she picked up Hope, settled her on her hip, and walked toward the door, toward her husband, toward the future they'd built together and the one they were about to create. "I'm ready," she said. And she was. Not because she knew what was coming, or because she wasn't afraid, or because she had all the answers. She was ready because she'd learned that you didn't need certainty to move forward. You just needed courage, and someone to walk beside you when the path got rough. They climbed onto the wagon, Hope between them, and started down the road. Delilah didn't look back. There was no point. The past was behind them, full of hard lessons and harder truths, but also full of the strength they'd needed to survive it. Ahead lay Wyoming, and whatever challenges that would bring, new land to break, new obstacles to overcome, new fears to face. But they'd faced worse before, and they'd do it again, together, for as long as it took, because that's what family did, what love did. It showed up, day after day, and chose to keep fighting for what mattered. The wagon rolled west, carrying 3 people who'd learned that survival wasn't about being perfect or fearless or always knowing the right answer. It was about being willing to try, to fall down and get back up, to ask for help when you needed it, and offer help when you could give it. It was about building something worth fighting for, and then fighting for it with everything you had. And in the end, that was enough.